on First at 9 this Saturday, the 12th of July 2025. Tariff turmoil. President Anura Dissanayake eyes a breakthrough in US tariff negotiations, aiming to further reduce the 30% tariffs on local exports. Meanwhile, economists urge swift reforms, highlighting the Economic Transformation Act as key to unlocking UK duty-free trade benefits. Presidential priorities. President calls on all government workers to spend the 1.4 trillion rupees earmarked as capital expenditure to spur economic growth. Neighbourhood first. India's development assistance making tangible strides in Sri Lankan communities, says Indian High Commissioner. Prime Minister Dr. Amarasuriya meanwhile emphasises that sustained investment in education is essential to shaping the country's long-term development. Diplomatic dispatch. The White House officially announces the nomination of Eric Meyer as the next Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the United States to Sri Lanka.
Enrolling now for the June 2025 intake and complete your degree in 2 years.
Men, from Derana, this is Derana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9, Sri Lanka's most trusted news source. I'm Derana, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. We begin with your top story. President Anura Dissanayake emphasized his intention to finalize negotiations aimed at securing a further reduction in the 30% reciprocal tariff imposed by the United States, with the goal of reaching an agreement ahead of the August 1st deadline. Meanwhile, economic experts emphasizes that to fully capitalize on the duty-free export concessions offered by the United Kingdom, Sri Lanka must urgently implement a series of economic reforms.
A discussion on Sri Lanka's export sector took place this morning, chaired by President Anura Dissanayake, bringing together all key stakeholders in the industry. The meeting particularly focused on reviewing the progress of ongoing negotiations concerning the upcoming reciprocal tariff policy set to be introduced by the United States. During the discussion, the participants examined the current landscape and the economic challenges that may arise from the enforcement of the new tariff framework.
ජූලි මාසේ 9 වෙනිදා 144ක තිබුණු බදු ප්‍රතිශතය 130 දක්වා පහළ වෙලා තිබෙනවා.
On July 9th, the previously set reciprocal tariff was revised down from 44% to 30%. That decision was primarily driven by the negotiations our government held with the US government. Yet the adjusted tariff rate still poses a significant challenge to Sri Lanka's competitiveness in the global marketplace. The Trump administration confirmed that this revised tariff structure will officially take effect on August 1st. At present, Sri Lankan exports face a 10% tariff, but this will increase to 30% once the new policy is implemented. While several bilateral understandings have been reached between the two countries, a comprehensive and binding agreement is yet to be finalized. From Sri Lanka's perspective, it is crucial that any final arrangement considers the protection of local industries, key economic indicators, geopolitical dynamics, and most importantly, our national sovereignty. At this stage, deliberations are ongoing to determine which conditions are feasible for us to accept and which are not. Our goal is to conclude these discussions and finalize the agreement before the 1st of August deadline. We remain hopeful that the final agreement will allow for a further reduction in the proposed tariff rate. Nevertheless, should a consensus not be reached in time, alternative measures are being explored to safeguard the country's interests. Ultimately, we are working towards an outcome with the Trump administration that will shield our economy, protect local employment, and preserve the livelihoods of our people.
Meanwhile, in the wake of the United States imposing a 30% reciprocal tariff on Sri Lankan exports, the United Kingdom unveiled a new trade package introducing a series of measures aimed at broadening duty-free access for imported goods. Under this initiative, developing nations including Sri Lanka will be granted the opportunity to export goods to the UK without incurring import duties. According to the UK's Department for Business and Trade, the move is designed to strengthen economic partnerships by making goods more affordable for British consumers, while simultaneously supporting the growth of developing economies. Weighing in on the issue, an economic expert emphasized the urgent need for comprehensive reforms to steer the country toward becoming a resilient, export-oriented economy.
It is crucial that the government initiates meaningful economic reforms necessary for Sri Lanka to evolve in a robust, export-driven economy. Innovation must take center stage in this transformation, alongside efforts to boost productivity and enhance the global competitiveness of the country's export sector. Yet there appears to be no evidence to suggest that essential reforms required to achieve these goals are being enacted at present. The Economic Transformation Act was specifically designed to drive this process forward. It is unfortunate that this act is still not implemented by the government.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Yadia, ලොව වැඩියෙන්ම අලෙවි වන ඉලෙක්ට්‍රික් ස්කූටරය අබාන්ස් ඔටෝ වෙතින්.
The Sri Lanka Association of Manufacturers and Exporters of Rubber Products called on the government to intensify negotiations with the United States following the announcement of a 30% reciprocal tariff on Sri Lankan rubber product imports. The chairman of the association, Pushpika Janadira, noted that Sri Lankan exporters are already under pressure and cannot absorb a steep 30% tariff without losing the global market. Compared to the tariffs set on Vietnam, which are 20%, and the tariffs on India, which are yet to be finalized, the association warns that the Sri Lankan tyre sector will be slapped with the critical setback. The association further emphasized that challenges faced by Sri Lanka's glove exporters and stated that prolonged uncertainty caused by steep tariffs could stall future investment in the sector. President Anura Dissanayake highlights that the government has approved the highest capital expenditure in recent times through Budget 2025 and went on to say that spending the whopping 1,400 billion rupees passed as such is the collective responsibility of all state sector workers. Addressing the Mathura District Special Coordination Committee meeting, the President revealed that if the state sector manages to spend the 1.4 trillion rupees in total, it would be the largest state sector investment made by a Sri Lankan government in history.
The Mathura District Special Coordination Committee meeting was held yesterday at the Mathura District Secretariat's auditorium. The meeting was led by President Anurakumara Dissanayake. The meeting was attended by co-chairs of the Mathura District Coordination Committee, Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development Sunil Handunetti, Governor of the Southern Province Bandula Harishchandra, and many members of the governing party and the opposition representing the Mathura District.
මෙවැනි ලොකු ප්‍රාදේශීය ලේකම් කාර්යාල ඕනද? මේකේ තත්ත්වය මොකද්ද?
මේක ජනාධිපතිතුමා 2015 වගේ තමයි පටන් ගත්තේ. මේක ජනාධිපතිතුමා තියෙන lower ground floor කියලා එකක් තියෙනවා. upper ground floor කියලා එකක් තියෙනවා. එකත් යට තියෙන්නේ. දැන් මෙච්චර ප්‍රමාණයක් වීදම් කරපු නිසා
මිලියන 100කට කිට්ටු වෙන වීදම් කරලා.
මිලියන 100ක් වීදම් කරලා තියෙනවා. අර ස්ට්‍රක්චර් එක අර ඒවා කලින් කතා කරපු
කඩා වැටලා නැති නිසා.
කඩා වැටලත් නැහැ.
නමුත් ඊට පස්සේ ගොඩනැගිල්ල හැදුවට පස්සේ අපිට ඒක බරක් වෙනවනේ.
දැන් හක්මන තියෙන තව රජයේ කාර්යාලයත් උතන ගෙන්න ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් ප්‍රාදේශීය ලේකම්
ඔක්කොම හදලා report එකක් හදන්න බලන්න.
ඉදි කරන්නත් ගිහිල්ලා ඔකේ ගැටලු ටිකක් ගත්තා. ඔලන්ද කාලේ කොටුවක් තියෙනවා කියලා පුරාවිද්‍යාවකින් ප්‍රශ්න කරලා එතන නිදානයක් තියෙනවා කියලා එකත් පොඩි ප්‍රශ්න වගේක් ආවා එතන.
ඒකත් එකක් වෙන්නේ නැති ඉදි කරන.
ඒක තමයි යටට ගියේ.
ඒක තමයි. ඒක තමයි යට තිබුණා.
නැත්නම් උඩට යන්න ඕනේ නේ. පොල්ලේන යෝජිත ක්‍රිකට් පුහුණු පාසල.
ජනාධිපතිතුමනි අපි දැනට අත්පත් කරගත්ත ඉඩපත් තියෙනවා අක්කර 9යි රූට් 2යි පර්චස් 14ක. මේ සඳහා අවශ්‍ය කරන අනුමැතීන් සඳහා අපි ඉඩම් කොමසාරිස් ජෙනරාල්තුමා වෙත යවලා තියෙනවා.
කවුද ක්‍රිකට් බෝඩ් එකකින් කවුද එන්නේ? අප්‍රමාද.
දැන් ඔක්කොම මේ මම හිතන්නේ කැමැත්තත් ප්‍රකාශ කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒකම රිලීස් කරලා දෙන්න තමයි තියෙන්නේ.
ක්‍රිකට් බෝඩ් එකට දෙන ක්‍රමය ගැන තියෙනවා සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි ඒ වගේ ආයතනයකට වාර්ෂිකව ඉඩමේ තක්සේරු වටිනාකමෙන් 104ක වගේ
මෙහෙමයි තියෙන්නේ. ඔය ඉඩම් තක්සේරු.
We have to rethink how we evaluate land. When evaluating land, we must look into the purpose for which the land is sought to be allocated. For example, there is a cricket stadium in Colombo owned by the UDA. The stadium has been evaluated based on market value. That is wrong. Evaluators seem to have hypothesized that a shopping mall rests atop this land and not a stadium. Evaluating land as such is wrong. So we have to rethink how we evaluate land. If we are going to allocate land for the construction of a cricket school, we cannot cannot look at it from a business perspective. That is more of a community development effort. The valuation of land must reflect that purpose. On the contrary, if we take a strict market-oriented approach, we will never be able to put up cinemas, much less cricket schools. How long will you take to construct the ground if the land is released?
Immediately මේ සූදානම්
අපි ඒක ඉක්මනින් කරමු මේ පැත්තෙන් ඉඩම නිදාස් කළා දුන්නොත් බෝඩ් එකට සල්ලි තියෙනවනේ එහෙනම් ප්‍රමාද වෙන්නේ නැහැ නේද අර අපි ඉඩම නිදාස් කළා දෙන වැඩ ටික හදන්නකෝ අපි මේ අවුරුද්දේ ආසන්න වශයෙන් ගත්තොත් billion 1400
We have allocated around 1,400 billion rupees for capital expenditure this year. That is the highest amount of money allocated for the purpose by a government in recent times. We have to spend the 1.4 trillion rupees in total by the 31st of December. If we are able to do so, our achievement will go down in history as the highest state sector investment. If we invest more in the government, we will be able to render noticeable benefits to the growth of the country's economy. We aim to achieve an economic growth of 5% this year. We have to spend and invest the money allocated in order to achieve that target. The decision to spend the funds allocated is up to you. So look into these matters thoroughly. If you are unable to spend all this money, let us know now itself. We are able to fund many other investments if so.
Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya states that Sri Lanka must make investments aimed at the future and that such investments must be made through education. Speaking at a ceremony in Anuradhapura today, the Premier highlights that investments in education are crucial to inspire leadership qualities among Sri Lanka's children. Speaking at the same event, Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Santosh Jha, claims that assistance granted by India to Sri Lanka brings with it positive impacts across every sector in Sri Lanka.
In memory of the late Venerable Maduluave Sobhita Thera, the handover ceremony of 115 houses under the Venerable Maduluave Sri Sobhita Thera Village housing project took place today in Halambavawa Grama Niladhari division at Mahavilachia, Anuradhapura. The event was held under the patronage of Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya. The Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Santosh Jha, also participated in the special ceremony.
We recently witnessed a highly successful state visits in both directions in a short space of time. During his visit to Sri Lanka, Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi, characterized India and Sri Lanka as civilizational twins. The shared heritage of Buddhism is among the strongest of cultural bonds that unite the people of our two countries. It is also noteworthy that the project is named after the Venerable Maduluave Sobhita Thero. The late Venerable Thero was a strong advocate of social justice, and social justice is among the main elements of the foundation on which India-Sri Lanka development partnership is based. Another interesting coincidence is that the project is located in Anuradhapura. This is among the districts where India's continued firm commitment to development cooperation with Sri Lanka is most evident today. These and numerous other such development assistance initiatives of India are bringing a positive impact in the everyday life of Sri Lankans across virtually all sectors.
Even though I do not talk about this matter in public, late Venerable Sobhita Thera made a significant impact on my life. It is true that I learned about Buddhism from him. There are many things that I learned from him. His firm stance and public statements against injustice, along with his fearless confrontation of those issues, inspires me still. Listening to the thoughts shared by everybody here today, it is clear that Venerable Sobhita Thera is a mesmerizing character. He led society and was never limited to the temple. The people who live in this village, especially the children, have the responsibility of carrying forward Sobhita Thera's legacy and his qualities. While we take economic and social strides forward, we must also make an investment towards the future. That investment will be made through education. The children seated before me will one day take over leadership of this country. This village must produce a generation of children capable and ready to take on that responsibility.
The joint communique of the 58th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting was held recently in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Sri Lanka's Minister of Foreign Affairs Vijitha Herath too attended the meeting and called on several key diplomatic figures representing the ASEAN region on the sidelines of the meeting.
The foreign minister met with the Malaysian Prime Minister Dato Seri Anwar bin Ibrahim at his office. Bilateral discussions focused on increasing employment opportunities for Sri Lankan workers across various sectors in Malaysia. Sri Lankan Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath also called on Australian Minister of Foreign Affairs Penny Wong and discussed avenues of bolstering the Sri Lanka-Australia bilateral relationship in key areas of mutual interest. In the meantime, Minister Vijitha Herath also met with the Pakistani Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar on the sidelines of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting in Malaysia. Discussions led to the mutual agreement of working collaboratively in areas of common interest to further deepen the long-standing bilateral relationship between the two nations. The Sri Lankan Foreign Minister also met with his Thai counterpart, Mary Sangiman Ponsa, and discussed avenues of bolstering Thai-Sri Lanka bilateral relations as well as the two nations' commitment towards working together on shared regional priorities. Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath also held bilateral discussions with the Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, on the sidelines of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting. Talks centered on bolstering bilateral relations across political, economic and cultural spheres. Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath met Park Yoon-joo, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. Foreign Minister Herath proposed the recruitment of more Sri Lankan workers through the increase of the employment quota granted to Sri Lanka. Minister Vijitha Herath also called on Filipino Foreign Affairs Undersecretary for Bilateral Relations and ASEAN Affairs, Maria Teresa Lazaro, in Malaysia. Taking to X, Filipino Foreign Affairs Undersecretary for Bilateral Relations and ASEAN Affairs, Maria Teresa Lazaro, noted that the Philippines looks forward to the third edition of the Philippines-Sri Lanka political consultations scheduled to take place in Colombo this year. Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath also delivered the keynote address at the Sri Lanka Investor Trade and Tourism Forum 2025 held in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The forum aimed to position Sri Lanka as a prime investment, trade and tourism destination with special emphasis on opportunities presented by the Colombo Port City and the BOI.
It is indeed the strong vision of the government of President Amrakumara Dissanayake to both broaden cooperation and deepen our partnership with Malaysia in all areas. Business and economic cooperation will remain a key pillar in this regard. I have pleasure, therefore, to say to you that doing business in Sri Lanka would be a productive, mutually gainful proposition, and I invite you to consider joining Sri Lanka's journey forward.
The White House made an announcement regarding the nomination of the next U.S. ambassador to Sri Lanka. According to the statement, the White House has announced the nomination of Eric Meyer, a career diplomat from California, as the next ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary of the United States of America to the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. U.S. President Donald Trump has formally submitted Meyer's name to the United States Senate for confirmation. Eric Meyer, a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, is the senior bureau official for the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs. He previously served as U.S. Consul General in Kazakhstan and Consul General in Cambodia. Pakistan Army Chief Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir is expected to embark on an official visit to Sri Lanka later this month. The visit to Colombo is likely to take place on the 21st of July. Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir will also visit Indonesia after the Sri Lanka visit. Matters of bilateral interest are expected to be discussed during the two visits.
Arpico Next Gen. Make the leap to faster sleep.
Welcome back. Taking you to more local news, in a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court reaffirmed the decision of the Court of Appeal and upheld the sentencing of a businessman for his involvement in a 3.9 billion rupee value-added tax fraud, which is dubbed South Asia's largest tax fraud. The decision was passed by a three-member bench of the Supreme Court comprising Justices Janak De Silva, Arjuno Besekara and Sobita Rajakaruna. 3 individuals were sentenced by the Colombo High Court to 20 years rigorous imprisonment and were charged a hefty fine for defrauding the Inland Revenue Department of 3.9 billion rupees due as value-added tax. The 3.9 billion rupee fraud, which was committed between the 15th of November 2002 and the 15th of December 2004, went down as the largest tax fraud ever committed in South Asia. The 3 accused, who absconded when the High Court of Colombo was deliberating the matter, later filed a petition with the Court of Appeal to overturn the High Court's judgment. The Court of Appeal, however, dismissed the appeal and affirmed the decision of the High Court of Colombo. Subsequently, one of the appellants, a businessman by the name of Muhammad Kutubuddin, took the matter up to the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, prompting the Attorney General's Department to file a motion against the petition so filed. Making submissions on behalf of the state at Sri Lanka's apex court, Additional Solicitor General Shanil Kularatne asserted that the appellant's petition seeking to overturn the decision of the Court of Appeal is legally untenable, since he fled the country to avoid the High Court trial. Accordingly, the Additional Solicitor General moved the Supreme Court to reaffirm the decision of the Court of Appeal and dismiss the petition filed by the appellant. Consequently, the 3-member bench of the Supreme Court, comprising Justices Janak De Silva, Arjuna Obesekara and Sobita Rajakaruna, delivered a unanimous verdict yesterday, reaffirming the judgments of the lower courts and highlighting that the appellant had no legal basis to challenge the earlier decision, especially after evading trial and fleeing the country. The Supreme Court ruled that no further petitions regarding this case will be entertained and underscored that the law does not support repeated legal challenges once proper judgments have been delivered. The Aruna Sadahan Wandana program, organised by the Aruna newspaper, was held at the Kiribera sacred site in Kataragama in line with the Kataragama Asala festival. As part of the Aruna Sadahan Wandana program, a Kapruk Puja also took place under the guidance of Chief Prelate of the Kiribera Temple, Most Venerable Kobbawaka Daminda Thera. The Board of Directors and Editors of Liberty Publishers hosted an Aloka Puja at the Kiribera premises thereafter. The Kiribera religious site was lit up with a large number of electric bulbs. Taking you to business news, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday said he had positive and constructive talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi as the two major powers vie to push their agendas in Asia at a time of tension over Washington's tariff offensive. The top U.S. diplomat was in Malaysia on his first Asia trip since taking office, seeking to stress the United States' commitment to the region at the East Asia Summit and ASEAN Regional Forum. Rubio had his first in-person talks with China's foreign minister, which came after Beijing warned Washington against reinstating hefty levies on its goods next month and threatened retaliation against nations that strike deals with the US to cut China out of supply chains. Wang sharply criticized Washington during talks with Asian counterparts in Malaysia, calling the US tariffs typical unilateral bullying behavior. But both sides described their bilateral meeting as positive and constructive yesterday. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the odds of Trump meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping were high. Rubio emphasized that his sit-down with Wang was not a negotiation, but rather about establishing a constructive baseline to continue talks. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also noted that Trump had been invited to visit China and added that it is a visit Trump wants to undertake. He asserted that it would not be just a visit, but a visit that would have some takeaways from it that are concrete. China's foreign ministry said Wang had emphasized that both countries should translate consensus reached by their leaders into policies and actions. U.S. President Donald Trump imposed a 30% tariff on imports today from Mexico and the European Union starting on the 1st of August. The decision was taken after weeks of negotiations with the key trading allies failing to reach a more comprehensive trade deal. The EU initially hoped to strike a comprehensive trade agreement, including 0-for-0 tariffs on industrial goods, but months of difficult talks have led to the realization it will probably have to settle for an interim agreement and hope something better can still be negotiated. According to U.S. Treasury data, Trump's cascade of of tariff orders since returning to the White House has begun generating tens of billions of dollars a month in new revenue for the United States government. U.S. customs duties revenue shot past $100 billion in the federal fiscal year through to June. Welcome back to First at 9. In your international news, a preliminary investigation report on the devastating Air India crash that killed 260 people revealed that a cut in the fuel supply to the engines may have caused the aviation disaster.
According to the report by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the fuel control switches in the cockpit of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner had been flipped, starving the engines of fuel. The aircraft had reached an airspeed of 180 knots when both engines' fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run position to the cutoff position, one after another with a time gap of 1 second. In the cockpit voice recording, one of the pilots is heard asking the other why he cut off the fuel switch. The other pilot responded that he did not do so. Shortly after, the switches were reversed back to where they should have been, and the engines were in the process of powering back up when the crash took place. On the 787, the fuel cutoff switches are between the two pilots' seats, immediately behind the plane's throttle levers. They are protected on the sides by a metal bar and have a locking mechanism designed to prevent accidental cutoff. The report says that airport footage shows the ram air turbine, an emergency power source on the aircraft, deployed during the plane's initial climb after the takeoff, and that the plane started to lose altitude before crossing the airport perimeter wall. The report states that when fuel control switches are moved from cutoff to run while the aircraft is in flight, each engine's full authority dual engine control automatically manages a relight and thrust recovery sequence of ignition and fuel introduction. Seconds after the engines attempted to relight, one pilot issued the Mayday distress call. The controller called out for the plane's call sign but didn't get a response and watched the plane crash in distance. Air India acknowledged that it received the report and said it will continue cooperating with authorities in the investigation. Air India Flight 171 took off from Ahmedabad Airport on June 12th and was headed to London's Gatwick, carrying 242 passengers and crew members. In addition to those on board, a number of people on the ground were killed when the plane crashed into the BJ Medical College and Hospital hostel, resulting in 260 total fatalities.
Has not responded to requests for comment. The monastery housed around 200 people displaced by nearby fighting between the army and pro-democracy forces. That's all for tonight from First at 9. Thank you. Have a great night.